Hello everybody, welcome to week 10 of our course. I can't believe it, it's flying by. Pretty soon it'll be Thanksgiving and the semester will be over. A couple of administrative points before we get started. First of all, I've posted on Scholar some potential paper topics because that's actually coming up pretty soon. Remember, that's going to be due on the last Thursday before Thanksgiving, so that's coming up pretty fast. Remember, we don't have class on that day, but I do want your papers by 5 p.m. that day. That way you won't have to worry about them over Thanksgiving break. Also on that, I've posted 3 potential paper topics that I think sort of capture what we've talked about in class so far. But if there's something else that you guys are really passionate about writing or something like that, just let me know. Send me an email, come by and talk to me, and we can work it out. And I think that's the main thing I wanted to talk about administratively. So anyway, on to the reviews from last week. We started out, so this started us out on epistemology. We're talking about epistemology now. We switched from the reality portion of the course into the knowledge portion of the course. Remember when I was talking about epistemology, I told you guys that typically what's considered to count as knowledge. So epistemology, of course, is the study or the theory of knowledge. But what we're really talking about is we're talking about justified true belief. It seems like if we want to say that we know something, then we have to say that it's true, because it just seems wrong to say that you can know something that's not true. You have to believe it, so knowledge tends to entail belief. You can't really say that you know something even if you don't believe it. It's just kind of a confused sort of way of thinking about things. So the real issue comes in when we're talking about justification. What justifies us, as the example that I gave of driving on the Blue Ridge Parkway, and you see the front of a red barn. Your friend asks you, "Hey, did you see the red barn?" You say, "Yeah," and they say, "Well, did you know that was really there?" And you're like, "Yeah, sure, I knew it." And so, like, going back to the 3 criteria, in order for you to say you know it, you have to believe that it's there, right? And in order to know it, you have to say that it's true. And that's when things get tricky, because in this particular example, remember we were just talking about the facade of a barn, which was held up by 2x4s or whatever holding it up. So it's not true that there's a red barn there, so it doesn't seem like you can know it. And the real question becomes, what would justify you in saying that you do know it? Would it be getting out of your car and walking around, the barn on all 4 sides, which we said even that may not justify you because it could be a hologram or something like that. Garrett said, a very thorough investigation of it, and maybe that's what it would take. But then also, even that sort of leads us into Descartes' thing. What do we mean by thorough? Because we've seen that our senses can deceive us, which is what Descartes sets out to talk about. So the real question is, what does it take? Is it something internal in us? Is it something that's reliably worked for us in the past and saying we know something probabilistic? Or is it something like Descartes talks about with this idea of clear and distinct truths justifying us? Okay, so we started out with the things that I can doubt by Descartes, which is drawn from his first 2 meditations. And as Descartes said, the purpose of his meditation, essentially he was taking on, it's called scholasticism, which was basically a holdover from Aristotelian thinking. So Aristotle really dominated in the Middle Ages, in sort of the years that the church was in power. And basically the Aristotelian tradition is that things, you form general theories after you empirically observe things through your senses. So you start with the particular and then you work to the universal. Whereas with Plato, you remember, you start with the universal, you start with the form, and then you work to the particular instances of that thing. And Descartes thought that there was something wrong with Aristotle's way of arriving at truth, because he says, look, we start with the particular and then we work our way to the universal, but the way that we arrive at the particular is through our senses, and our senses have been shown to deceive us in the past. And he gives several arguments in these first 2 meditations showing that our senses could be deceiving us. The first thing is just our senses have deceived us as far as like the size and shape of things, right? Like the distance, like We think that, if we're just looking at the sun, we think, oh, well, the sun is that big. But in reality, we know the sun is much larger than that. So that's one way that the senses can deceive us. There are optical illusions, things like that. The second thing that Descartes brings up is this dream argument. And essentially the idea is, you can have sensations in your dreams that are just like the sensations that you're having when you're awake. They seem just as vivid, according to Descartes, where, for instance, he says he could be dreaming that he's sitting by a fire and he can feel the heat from the fire. But in reality, he's actually in his bed, and the sensation appears to be the same. So if that's the case, how can we know that we're not dreaming? And the third thing that he considers is that there could be somebody deceiving us. And first he says God, but then he's like, well, it doesn't seem to be in the nature of God to deceive me, so really it could be some sort of evil demon, right? There could be an evil demon that is out there that's making me think that I'm having certain, sense perceptions when in fact that I'm not. And if I say, well, I know it, then I really don't know it because it's not true, because the evil demon is just deceiving me. So Descartes is out on a project, at least in the first two meditations, where he's starting out to say, look, we have to be skeptical of our sense perceptions, and this leads to a position known as external world skepticism. Although, eventually, as we've seen, Descartes wants to move past skepticism. He thinks that's the place that we have to start when we're talking about knowledge. If we really want to say that we know something, we have to consider the hardcore skeptic's claim